single thing we do.
You're going to keep on keeping on, and that's great. Could you tell this committee if there's any specific environmental or climate policy that is simply non-negotiable? It is a red line that would, if crossed, have you resign just like Minister Guilbeault did?
Is reviewing
yes
it
or no,
right
Minister?
Now?
Do you agree that these mandates don't make sense for rural Canadians? Yes or no?
Because it's hidden, yeah, but the price has gone up on everything.
It's not that. I'm just saying
Minister,
I don't see where you're seeing it.
Minister, to the next question, are you constitutionally impaired from saying the word oil pipeline?
Oil.
Okay.
I'm talking about oil. Oil from Saudi Arabia comes to Canada, but they're not subject to the penalties that your Liberal government is placing on Canadian oil.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, at the UN's International Maritime Organization meeting, your government voted in favor of new net zero carbon tax on shipping. Witnesses told this committee that that tax could cost up to $500 per ton, which will obviously get passed on to Canadians through higher prices of everything that we buy that's shipped here. Do you have any idea whatsoever what this is going to cost Canadians through higher prices?
Thank you for that question, and through you, Mr. Chair. This has been a long-going issue that I hear from questions coming from the Conservatives, which is that the idea that any action on climate change is a net negative, not only for our country, but for the world. We know that the impacts of climate change
I'm just looking for the cost of the tax. If implemented, do we has the department or has done any estimates on what the tax would cost the average item in Canada and therefore Canadians that's passed on to?
So as far as the policies that we have in place, we already, and I have said this before, but actions such as the industrial carbon price do not increase the cost of food for Canadians, do not. And so when we're talking about the actual policies that we have in place in Canada, we do actually, whenever we pass a regulation, provide a regulatory assessment, which is made available. It's transparent and available.
Thank you, Minister. I look forward to seeing that once that tax is implemented. But you talked about the policies that are still in place, and for years, you defended every major climate policy that this government has introduced: the carbon tax on consumers, the $2 billion tree planting program, the emissions cap on oil and gas, the greenwashing regulations, the EV mandate. Then overnight, they have been delayed, watered down, or abandoned entirely. Now, every time one of these policies seems to collide with reality, it falls apart. So what should Canadians conclude from this pattern of you supporting policies and then having to step back from them?
I think what Canadians should take from the work that our government is doing is that we are working forward for policies that are collaborative, meet the needs of Canadians, and fight climate change. We have very much set forward, and it says it in the climate competitiveness strategy, which was in the budget, that we are working to strengthen the industrial carbon price, strengthen methane regulations. We're working on a taxonomy for investment guidelines. We are taking real actions, and we're doing that in collaboration with provinces and territories and making sure the Canadians are at the centre of our policies.
Thank you, Minister. Somebody not at the centre that used to be at the centre, former Environment and Energy Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, publicly said that your new climate competitiveness strategy isn't a climate strategy at all. Do you agree with him? Is he wrong?
We have a climate strategy, which is our emissions reductions plan, and we provide progress reports based on that emissions reductions plan. The climate competitiveness strategy is really the economic piece, putting in place things that were envisioned by the emissions reduction plan, but also going further in some places. It is not the emissions reductions plan. That is a separate document. It is a tool to move forward on climate competitiveness.
Yeah, well, thank you for raising that. The Environment Commissioner, the PBO, the independent experts, pretty much everyone except for yourself, has agreed that you will not hit the Paris targets as originally intended. Can you finally admit that your emissions reduction plan is not working and will not achieve the targets that you've laid out?
Well, I am the Environment Minister, first of all, but second of all, when you're talking about the PBO report, specifically did not take into account the climate competitiveness strategy. And if we were going to take into account,
how you just said it wasn't a climate strategy.
No, I didn't say that. I said there was an emissions reductions plan, that the climate competitiveness strategies does not replace the emissions reductions plan.
So
It
everybody
sets
else
out
is wrong in
specific
saying
tools.
that we're not going to hit these targets, and you're right, and everyone else is wrong?
What I have said, if you'd let me complete that one, is that we always knew that the targets would be ambitious. We could set low targets, we could have stood by lower targets, and they would be easy to meet. This requires us to stretch. We're determined to keep doing the work to meet them.
Could you tell me the
but
gap
it's going to
in raw
take
numbers
continued work.
between what we expect the 2030 target, what the 2030 target is, and where we are going to end up in 2030? What is that gap right now?
So an emissions reductions plan will be provided by the end of this year, which will provide more details as to exactly where those different numbers stand. But by the way, the commitment to continue doing the work remains. And I think that that's a very important piece. And I would hope that the Conservatives would be willing to support us, because all I hear from Conservatives is that they keep on wanting to remove every single thing we do.
You're going to keep on keeping on, and that's great. Could you tell this committee if there's any specific environmental or climate policy that is simply non-negotiable? It is a red line that would, if crossed, have you resign just like Minister Guilbeault did?
Is there a single environment policy or climate change policy that the Conservatives will support and help us actually move forward on?
I'm here to ask you the questions. This is not about you asking a member of the opposition questions. This is about you answering a question. Is there a line in the sand of a specific environmental or climate policy that if this government, despite your objections, decided to remove, you would have to resign over just like Minister Guilbeault did?
My goal in everything I do is that we keep working to move our country to a low-carbon economy, to net zero, that we keep doing the work that we need to do. It's important for our future generations, and it's important to make sure that we're globally competitive.
Could you explain the economic consequences of delaying climate action and why consistent policies are important both for our communities and our businesses?
Thank you. And that's a really good question, because one of the things that I think gets missed in a lot of the noise that we hear in the House of Commons especially is that climate change and not taking action on climate change has a cost, a real cost right now. You can see it in the cost of food. One of the largest impacts on increased cost of food is the impact of climate change. It happens when there are droughts, when there are floods. All of these types of things impact the cost of food as we move forward. But beyond that, there's also a competitiveness moment for this country. And Canada has a real edge. We have 9 of the top 100 clean tech companies are based in Canada. So we are second only to the United States in the number of companies on that list. And there's a real moment that if we don't meet it, we lose economic opportunities for our country as well. And that is something that we need to consider. So when we put forward the climate competitiveness strategy, a big part of that was making sure that we were creating certainty and predictability for industry so that they could actually go to where the global economy is going. And the global economy is going to net zero. When I was at the G7, when I was at COP30, that was something that kept on being reinforced. And so if Canada wants to be able to have a space and to lead in that economy, to even be able to access diversified trade markets, making sure that we have sound climate policies here is important to being able to reach those opportunities.
And you've mentioned First Nations involvement in this new pipeline MOU that Alberta signed with Canada, but you also mentioned that you will not override Aboriginal rights and title, or rights and title interests, as the Liberal colleagues have also said. So if one First Nation out of the many First Nations that will be affected by the pipeline and the tanker ban doesn't give their consent, is this project going to end?
So let's take, there's a few different pieces to this. One is that the pipeline proposal in this MOU does not actually have a route that's designed yet. There are a lot of conversations that have to happen.
Let me put it a different way then. Let me put it a different way. When the Trans Mountain Pipeline got approved, there were many First Nations that did not give their consent. Mm-hmm. But the Liberals still approved the project and even bought the project. Is that similar circumstance going to happen with this latest proposal or this latest MOU proposal?
The MOU proposal sets out that we need to see the provinces, we need to see the consultation with Indigenous peoples. The Prime Minister has said that we need agreement from Indigenous people.
I understand that.
And that exact process, I will say, is not part of my day-to-day work on this piece, right? So I am telling you, I think it's very important.
Minister, I've got to disagree with you there.
Yeah.
The Environmental Assessment Act specifically says that it has to deal with rights and title interests.
Yeah.
So to kind of deflect and say it's somebody else's problem, unless you're insinuating that the Major Projects Office is going to take full control of this process, what I'm asking is, if one First Nation along the pipeline route or one First Nation along the tanker ban exemption does not give their consent, will that be characterized as running roughshod over Aboriginal interests?
So what I'm repeating is that any project, and specifically as set out in the MOU, would need the agreement of Indigenous peoples. And I can't engage in hypotheticals because, like I said, we have many steps forward.
But it's not hypothetical. What the Liberals did in the Trans Mountain Pipeline approved the project even though they didn't have consent from certain First Nations. So it's not hypothetical. There's already a precedent. But let me ask you this question. You've talked a lot about competitiveness, but a lot of the competitiveness and the obstacles you're placing in terms of us being an energy superpower only applies to Canadian suppliers and producers and manufacturers. Is there any legislation or policy coming down from the Liberal government that will actually put the same measures on oil coming from Saudi Arabia or United States?
So, two pieces to that I would say. First of all, when it comes to products like LNG, and for example, Asian markets like South Korea, Japan.
Oil from Saudi Arabia.
But I was just, if I can say, because you were talking about restrictions or the like, whatever you were saying there.
Oil from Saudi Arabia, from the United States, will they be subject to the same measures you're putting on Canadian suppliers?
What I was saying, though, because the first part is you were saying that it's Canadian pieces. What I was saying was, or trying to say, is when it comes to LNG, for example, there are actual
I'm not talking about LNG, I'm talking about oil.
Okay.
I'm talking about oil. Oil from Saudi Arabia comes to Canada, but they're not subject to the penalties that your Liberal government is placing on Canadian oil. Is there going to be measures on Saudi Arabia oil or United States oil currently coming into Canada?
Well, so first of all, as Minister of Environment, I'm not the person who's managing imports, but what I will say is that the export markets to which we're trying to, with all of our products and all of our energy products, there are actual, bona fide rules that are being put in place by the jurisdictions to which we're seeking to export that are asking for low methane. They're asking for it to be lower carbon.
I can agree.
If you are looking to
that
any market for any of our products.
Okay, Minister, I can agree that you're not the Minister responsible for importing, but you are the Minister responsible for climate change action as the Liberal government has put forward. But it doesn't seem to apply to anybody except Canadian producers and suppliers. So it will not apply to Saudi Arabia, will not apply to the United States.
A very short answer, please.
What I would say is that the world's moving towards the low-carbon economy, and Canada has to be ready to meet that moment.
How is our government ensuring that clean economy investments translate to good middle-class jobs right across Canada from coast to coast to coast?
Thank you. So when different organizations have looked at the statistics for the jobs that will be available in a clean economy, there are substantial jobs right across, frankly, in different types of work. I believe that there was one estimate that there would be about 400,000 jobs created. I think that was an RBC study. And so one of the bigger issues we face is actually, how do we fill all these new opportunities that are going to come into being with these new types of projects, and it goes a whole stretch of things. So, for example, when I was talking about clean tech companies in Canada, those are a bunch of exciting jobs for Canadians who want to jump into that area. There's also a lot in the area of skilled trades. So when we look at, how do we build this electrical grid for the future? It's important that we have the people who are ready to do that. Retrofitting homes so that Canadians can save on their energy costs and at the same time reduce emissions. One thing that I was really excited about in this budget is the Youth Climate Corps, because that's a real chance for young people to get the skills, paid to get those skills, and to be able to have an active role in reducing emissions and to move towards, how do we protect our communities from the impacts of climate change. So the Youth Climate Corps, I actually had a chance when I was in Montreal to meet with many young people from diverse organizations and groups doing different things on campus or in different kind of work environments. And they were really excited to talk about what are these opportunities, how can we make sure we're setting up Canadians and young Canadians to meet those new opportunities, and also how they can have a say in framing what that will be. And that's very much, the Youth Climate Corps has been something that's been pushed for quite a while. And being able to actually see that there's a project in place in this budget is a big step forward. And I would say something that we can build on as far as what are the other job opportunities and how do we set up the youth in the best way.
Thank you, Minister, for finally taking some time to meet with us today. Minister, rural Canadians have been very clear that EV mandates make little sense in their small communities where long distances are vast, harsh weather, high vehicle costs, and limited charging infrastructure make adoption far more difficult. Will you acknowledge to this committee that a rigid one-size-fits-all approach does not work for rural Canada, yes or no?
So as you know, the EV regulations we had consultations that closed last month. We're reviewing it right now.
Yes or no, Minister? Do you agree that these mandates don't make sense for rural Canadians, yes or no?
What I was saying is that I just want to be clear. Do I believe that EVs can make sense in rural areas? We've seen in other parts of the world, absolutely. But I just want to be clear that we're in a period where we're reviewing after having completed consultations. So right now, we're still looking at how to make sure that we have the strongest policy going forward on zero-emission vehicles.
Thank you, Minister. Brian Kingston from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association told this committee that the government's pause of the 2026 EV mandate was a recognition that this regulation isn't working and that the targets are unfeasible, noting that it would require a 200% plus increase in sales in order to meet your 2026 requirement. Based on that evidence, will you commit to permanently removing the EV mandates, yes or no?
So we're in a period of review, and I will be putting out new pieces.
Do you personally support removing the mandates, you, as the Environment Minister?
I support making sure that we have a policy that is based on the consultations and review, and it will be the strongest policy. Do I believe in zero-emission vehicles as part of the future around this world? Absolutely.
But will you support removing the mandates? Yes or no?
Well, I, as Minister of Environment, will take into account everything that's come through the consultations and come up with a strong policy that makes sure that Canadians do have access to zero-emission vehicles.
So as the Minister, you don't support or not support? You're not prepared to say that?
As a minister, I'm not going to pre-reveal what the policy will be.
Okay.
When I am completing it. What I'm telling you is, do I support zero-emission vehicles as part of the future, not only just in Canada, but around the world?
I asked specifically about the mandates, though. The mandates specifically. Do you support them, yes or no?
I am in a period of review where I will be releasing shortly the full policy.
Mr., you had talked about other countries, and Mr. Kingston testified that comparing Canada to Norway is a total outlier and not a fair comparison, citing Norway's small urbanized population, short driving distances, massive subsidies, and oil fund finance incentives that Canada would never do. Given this evidence, why does your department continue to cite Norway as a model when the auto sector says that it's fundamentally incomparable to Canadian realities? Quickly, Minister. Thank you.
There are a few pieces to that. The first part is, I think that it is worthwhile to look at the fact that Norway, as of today,
but it's not comparing apples to apples.
So Norway is a northern country that does have rural parts.
But it doesn't
to the country.
have vast distances the same as we do.
So what I'm just saying is there are lessons to be learned from a northern country.
In my riding, some people have to drive 1,000 kilometers to get to a specialty hospital. 1,000 kilometers,
right.
Minister. So how are the realities the same? I don't understand.
So maybe just so that I can help you on that, what I am saying is the way that the regulations, as they had been set out, were by percentage. You would assume that where you would see the pickup the first, and I think that that's borne true when you look at numbers, is that you start with more people in more urban areas and areas where there's more charging infrastructure.
Yeah, but the mandates are being applied right across the country, though, and they're applying to rural communities as well. Even the percentages, at no point does it make sense for them.
So the actual way that the standards were actually didn't require that it was 20% in every region of the country, for example. It was as a country total. And you would expect that uptake would begin in areas where...
But eventually it's 100%, yes? Yes or no? Eventually it's 100%, yes or no?
So first of all, under the review that we're doing, my time is up, but I will just say, ultimately, other countries are moving towards zero-emission vehicles. We are seeing uptake right around the world. And so Canada should be ready not only to produce those vehicles, but also to make sure that Canadians have access to those vehicles.
Thank you, Mrs. Minister. Can you elaborate on how climate action supports good jobs and economic growth, and talk about some of the clean energy projects underway that are driving innovation and economic opportunity in Canada?
Thank you. It actually consistently stumps me when I hear the Conservatives saying that they oppose all climate policies, because it's not just about reducing emissions, and we must. It's not just about the moral obligation to our future generations, which is there. I don't want to, I worry, because we talk about the economic piece, and it is really important that we do, but it's also really important that we don't lose sight of the fact that we have to do this because it's our obligation to all future generations, and it's essential for our country.
Thank you, witnesses, for being here today. Thank you, Minister, for finally appearing. I see that you're found time to be at the Finance Committee on October 20th, but took your time to get here. Minister, the recent MOU signed with Alberta suggested the immediate suspension of the clean electricity regulations. It wasn't in the Gazette this weekend. When will it come into effect?
Okay, so the clean electricity regulations are in effect now, but only begin applying in 2035. They were intentionally given as a long tail for all provinces and territories to be able to work towards
2035?
them. Yeah, if you look at the way the regulation is drafted, in 2035, that is when they begin to apply.
When will it be published?
So what I'm saying is, in the Memorandum of Understanding, the wording is that I have with the province of Alberta, or we have with the province of Alberta until April 1st to negotiate an agreement where they can show that they have a pathway to meet the objectives of the regulations.
Okay, so all of this is still under heavy negotiation?
It's right in, I can read you the exact wording of the agreement.
So we should presume no elements of this MOU will survive or could survive, or everything is up for negotiation?
What I would tell you is that with all provinces, I have the ability to negotiate a pathway to meet the objectives of a regulation. And I think it's a really amazing thing that Alberta is going to sit down and do that negotiation.
So you suggested earlier in your opening remarks that there was a climate cost of food, yet the industrial carbon tax is still applied to fertilizer production, grain drying, farm equipment, and you've made great great speeches in the House to the effect that this is not a tax, has no impact on food prices. Isn't that an oxymoron? I mean, like that's ridiculous. You say there's a cost of food for all these other things, but yet you're taxing the means of production of food, and it doesn't impact the price at the grocery store. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I can even provide the studies to this committee if
Would you?
want. Absolutely. There are studies time and time again, in fact, that say that the industrial carbon price does not increase the cost of food.
So then what does it impact? Is it just impact the viability of farms, and so farms get smaller?
No, it does. It's actually...
So farms consolidate to bigger farms?
Small farms aren't impacted by the industrial carbon price.
They're not impacted by it all, so the carbon taxes that I'm paying as a producer are what, imaginary?
The industrial carbon price applies to large industry. It applies in different ways in different parts of our country.
I pay carbon tax on the electricity and the equipment and the fertilizer that I use to run my farm. And you say that's imaginary?
I would love to see how you're breaking that down, but what I am telling you...
With dollars, with real dollars.
You wouldn't have a line, sir, that says anywhere industrial carbon price...
Because it's hidden, yeah, but the price has gone up on everything.
It's not hidden. It's not that. I'm just saying, I don't see where you're seeing it.
Minister, to the next question, are you constitutionally impaired from saying the word oil pipeline?
That's actually a very funny question. Does it matter to you if I use what words I use?
I appreciate the hilarity of it. You know, you said that there was a lot of discussion about the pipeline, but pipeline is a binary thing. It's either we build a pipeline or we don't. There's no middle ground. Do you support a pipeline?
I support our provinces working together if they want to work together. No, but that is what the Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta is about.
Ultimately, it leads to a pipeline or no pipeline, one or the other. Do you support a pipeline?
I support that if the provinces and the Indigenous peoples are in agreement, that then there is a pathway to actually make that happen. But I am not
what
going
happen?
For a pipeline. But what I'm saying, but I think it's really important. I would not override Indigenous peoples' agreement, and I would not override the province of British Columbia, which is what the Conservatives say they would do.
So the province of British Columbia has a veto?
The Prime Minister has been clear.
The Prime Minister has sole responsibility under the Constitution and C5.
You are repeating again the Conservative line that you would override the provinces and Indigenous people.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of interrupting. I think it would be nice to give ample time to respond to questions. Thank you.
Appreciate the point.
As I said, the Prime Minister has been clear, and he said it in the House of Commons, that there needs to be agreement from the province of British Columbia and of Indigenous peoples, and we are not going to override the jurisdiction of our provinces, and we're not going to override the rights of Indigenous rights holders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.